The rain came down in sheets, drumming against the warped shingles of my little house on Maple Street, a quiet corner of suburban Ohio where the trees glowed amber in late October. I sat by the window, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug of chamomile tea, staring at the blur of water streaking the glass. At 67, I'd grown used to evenings like this alone, with only the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards for company. My husband, Tom, had been gone for 3 years now, taken by a heart attack that felt like it stole half of mine too. The house, once filled with his laughter and the smell of his pipe tobacco, was too big for just me, but I couldn't bear to leave it. Not yet. The rain seemed to mirror the heaviness in my chest, a weight I carried since the bank sent that final foreclosure notice last week. I had until the end of the month to come up with 80, or I'd lose the only home I'd ever known, 36. I sipped my tea, the steam warming my face, and tried to push the thought away, but it clung like damp leaves to my boots. Then, a knock at the door startled me, sharp and insistent through the storm. I froze, my heart thumping. Who'd be out in this weather? I set the mug down, my arthritis flaring as I pushed myself up from the chair. The knock came again, softer this time, almost hesitant. I shuffled to the door, my slippers scuffing the worn rug, and peered through the peephole. There, soaked to the bone, stood Henry Whitaker, my neighbor's husband, his gray hair plastered to his forehead, his jacket dark with rain. What could he want, standing there alone? I opened the door, the cold air rushing in. Henry? Goodness, you're drenched. Come in, come in. He stepped inside, water dripping onto the mat, his eyes meeting mine with a quiet intensity that made my stomach twist. What's the kindest thing a neighbor has ever done for you? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. Henry stood in my cramped entryway, his boots leaving small puddles on the linoleum. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered even at 72, with hands calloused from years of fixing cars at his auto shop downtown. His wife, Clara, was my closest friend in the neighborhood, always stopping by with a plate of her famous pecan pie or a bundle of lavender from her garden. But Henry? He was kind enough, always waving when he mowed their lawn, but we'd never had a real conversation, not like this. Eleanor, I'm sorry to barge in, he said, his voice low, almost drowned by the rain outside. I needed to talk to you. I gestured to the living room, my heart still racing from the surprise. Let me get you a towel. You'll catch your death out there. He shook his head, water flicking from his hair. No, I'm fine. This won't take long. His eyes darted around the room, landing on the stack of unopened bills on the coffee table, the ones I'd been avoiding for weeks. I felt a flush of shame and moved to nudge them under a magazine, but his hand stopped me, gentle but firm. Eleanor, I know about the house, he said, his voice steady but soft, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. I froze, my breath catching. How did he know? I hadn't told anyone, not even Clara. The shame burned hotter now, prickling my cheeks. I don't know what you mean, I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small, damp envelope. Clara overheard you on the phone with the bank last week. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but, well, we've been worried about you. He held out the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly, not from the cold, I realized, but from something deeper. Take this, please. I stared at the envelope, my hands refusing to move. It was just a small thing, that envelope, no bigger than a birthday card, but it felt heavy with meaning. I shook my head, stepping back. Henry, I can't. Whatever it is, I can't. His eyes, a pale blue that reminded me of Tom's, held mine. Just open it, Eleanor, trust me. My fingers, stiff and uncertain, took the envelope. Inside was a check, made out to me for 80. My knees buckled, and I grabbed the arm of the couch to steady myself. Tears stung my eyes, blurring the numbers. Henry, why? I managed, my voice breaking. He smiled, a small, sad smile, and said, Because you're family to us, and family doesn't let family lose their home. I don't know how long I stood there, clutching that check, the rain still pounding outside. Henry didn't rush me, didn't say a word, just waited, his hands stuffed in his pockets like he was nervous he'd done the wrong thing. I wanted to give it back, to tell him I couldn't accept it, that it was too much. But the truth was, I had nothing left, no savings, no family to call, no way to keep the house Tom and I had built our life in. I sank onto the couch, the check still in my hand, and Henry sat across from me in the old armchair that used to be Tom's. "How can you afford this?" I asked, my voice thick. "You and Clara, you're not rich." He chuckled, a low, warm sound that eased the tension in the room. "We're not, that's true, but we've got enough, and we've been saving a bit. Clara's been selling her quilts at the church bazaar, and I fixed up an old Chevy for a fella who paid more than it was worth. We've been putting it aside, bit by bit, for something important." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. "And you, Eleanor, you're important." I shook my head, tears spilling now. "But why me? You barely know me." He looked down at his hands, his thumbs rubbing together, a gesture so human it made my chest ache. "You remind me of my sister Ruth. She passed a long time ago, but she was like you, strong, stubborn, too proud to ask for help. I couldn't help her when she needed it, and it's haunted me ever since. When Clara told me about your house, I thought, maybe this is my chance to do right by someone." His voice cracked, and he cleared his throat, looking away. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched his arm. "Henry, I don't know what to say." He met my eyes again, his smile softer now. "You don't have to say anything. Just keep making that chamomile tea and sharing it with Clara when she comes over. That's enough for us." We sat there for a moment, the silence between us filled with a kind of understanding that doesn't need words. I thought of Tom, how he'd always said kindness was like a pebble in a pond small, but it could ripple out forever. Have you ever had a moment when a stranger's kindness felt like a lifeline? Tell us about it in the comments below. The days that followed were a blur of gratitude and disbelief. I took the check to the bank, my hands shaking as I handed it to the teller, half expecting it to vanish like a dream. But it was real, and by the end of the week, the foreclosure notice was gone, replaced by a letter confirming my mortgage was clear. I could stay in my home, in the place where Tom and I had danced to old records in the living room, where we'd carved our initials into the oak tree out back. But it wasn't just the house that felt different, it was me. Henry's kindness had cracked open something inside me, something I'd locked away after Tom died. I started inviting Clara over more, not just for tea, but for long talks on the porch, wrapped in blankets as the autumn leaves fell. Henry would join us sometimes, bringing a thermos of diner coffee black, no sugar, the way he liked it. We'd laugh about the time Clara tried to teach me to quilt, and I sewed my sleeve to the fabric, or how Henry once fixed my car for free when I couldn't afford the shop. Slowly, they became more than neighbors, they became the family I'd lost. One evening, as we sat on my porch, Clara reached for my hand, her fingers warm against mine. "Eleanor, you know you're not alone anymore, right?" she said, her eyes crinkling with a smile. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Henry, sitting on the steps, turned to look at us, his face lit by the soft glow of the porch light. "We're in this together," he said simply. And in that moment, I felt a turning point, a realization that I wasn't just a widow on Maple Street struggling to hold on. I was part of something bigger, a community bound by small acts of love that carried more weight than any check ever could. As Thanksgiving approached, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, host a dinner. I cleaned the house, dusted off Tom's old tablecloth, and spent hours in the kitchen, the smell of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie filling the air. I invited Henry and Clara, of course, but also Mrs. Delaney from down the street, who used a walker and rarely left her house, and young Sam, the single dad who worked double shifts at the diner and always looked exhausted. We crowded around my dining table, the one Tom and I had bought at a thrift store 30 years ago, and passed plates of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce. There was laughter, the kind that warms you from the inside, and stories, Mrs. Delaney's tales of her childhood in Cincinnati, Sam's shy admission that he'd always wanted to learn to cook like this. Henry raised his glass of apple cider, his eyes meeting mine across the table. "To home," he said, his voice steady. and to the people who make it mean something. I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were the kind that come from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. As we cleared the dishes, Clara pulled me aside, her hands dusted with flour from the pie crust she'd helped me roll. "Eleanor, you've given us something too," she said softly. "You've reminded us what it means to open your heart again." I hugged her, the kind of hug that says everything words can't, and knew I'd carry this moment forever. Kindness hadn't just saved my home, it had brought me back to life. Has kindness ever changed your life? Share your story in the comments below.